Afternoon. Oh, let me add myself there, right? Hey guys, this is Jeff with Fluent American, and today, like always, we are targeting your pronunciation, taking a look at pronunciation files that you have sent me, and then providing some suggestions in terms of pronunciation of vowel sounds, linking, stress, placement, all kinds of things that will just help you sound a little bit more natural in American English pronunciation. As always, we are streaming on Lang 8 in addition to YouTube. If you're following on the Lang 8 stream, that's great. You can see my visuals though and hear what I'm hearing later if you go to youtube.com/fluentamerican, just a note. So saying some hello to some people. Hello to Emmanuel. Great to see you, man. Hope you're enjoying the Telegram group a bit. But yeah, so we have a sentence for you guys today that's kind of a fun one because it has lots of sounds and things like that. So you should be able to see that on the screen now. So let's just say this really quick to give you an idea of what we're getting into. So today we're going to analyze how you are saying this sentence. Who knew that who knew that Cookbook had good food? Thank you so much to DJ on the Lang 8 stream for the heart. So again, this sentence is, who knew that Cookbook had good food? So we're really playing around with the sound versus the oo sound. So if you find that you have confusions between and oo, like book versus booth, or like good versus like food, situations like that, this is going to be a great lesson for you. But again, we'll talk about linking and things like that too. So let's begin by talking a little bit about the oo sound. We're going to work backwards in our sentence. So that last word, food, food. How do you say food? Well, notice that I think a lot of students kind of go crazy with the mouth position a little bit. It's like super exaggerated ooh sound with like super round lips, like ooh, like food, food. And that's fine. You can make an ooh sound with very round lips. There's nothing wrong with doing that necessarily. But notice how I'm saying food. Food, food. Not really round at all, right? Pretty straight actually. Hello to Nikoniko. Sorry if I mispronounced that on the Lang 8 stream. So that's the very first thing is, as you get used to the sound, it's perfectly fine if you have round lips. You can say food, food with pretty round lips, but as you get more comfortable with it, and like most sounds in English, you're gonna realize that the mouth position not really as important as the placement. So making sure again that you're really getting the sound strong from low in your throat and it's very relaxed. Again, it's more like an sound. It's not ooh, it's more So that's the very first thing. Try to pronounce this from low in the throat. Try to make sure that nothing is tense because you want lots of air to be making it through. So again, if you're getting like an ooh sound in food, like when you say food, if you're saying like food, food, or even like food, food, what I'm doing is I'm raising the placement there. And it's just not going to sound very natural in American English pronunciation. Okay. Thank you to Olga for the follow. So what I would recommend instead, again, keeping that placement low. So instead of saying like food, try to do more food, food. Again, American English placement is really low. In terms of mouth position, if that's something that interests you, you want to make sure the back of your tongue is high and the front of your tongue is down. Okay, so the back of the tongue's really high, front of your tongue's really down. Ooh, food. Okay. Thank you to Tanara for the follow. Lang 8 is very active right now. Okay, I appreciate that, guys. So that's our first word. So food. But the word before that is good. Good. Super common word, right? So how do we pronounce good in a way that sounds natural? Okay. So for good, good, same tongue position. Back of your tongue high, front of your tongue down. But your lips can go even straighter and your mouth can open a little bit wider. Uh, uh, guh, guh. Again, compare food versus good. Ooh, uh, ooh, just a little bit wider on that sound. Okay. But as always, your placement's still relaxed and low in the throat. So again, it's still good, good. What I hear some students doing is they're doing things like good or good, but it's good, good. Again, relaxed and low. Okay. And if you're a female student watching this, from my women friends out there, make sure that again, American English placement is lower, for women, it's not just for men. Okay, so even in American English for women, you're still speaking from a low placement and relaxed. Okay, just note. You won't be able to go necessarily as deep as me unless you have a very unique voice. But it's still going to be lower, probably than in your native language. Okay, so again, how about just those two words together? Good food, good food, good food. Talking a little bit about stress too. So we have this adjective, good, and then we have noun with food. And remember, in English, if you have these combinations with an adjective plus a noun, typically your stress falls on your noun. So you don't usually want to say good food. You usually want to say good food, good food. Like, oh yeah, that place they have great food. They have really good food, good food. Stressing food. Okay. We'll talk more about stress patterns for this sentence in a moment. Let's take a look at the next part with the sound. So then you can see earlier in the sentence, we have cookbook, cookbook. Again, sound, sound. Again, open your mouth a little bit wider. Cookbook, cookbook. This is a compound noun. If you're not sure what a compound noun is, that means that you have two words that join together to make a single thing. So when this happens in English, we're going to stress cook. So you should not say cookbook. You should say cookbook. Can you hear a difference? Cookbook versus cookbook. You want to stress cook. Cookbook. Cookbook. Okay? Now, at the beginning of the sentence, we have a couple oo sounds. So first of all, we have who. So notice it's not who, it's who. Who. Slightly round lips, mouth mostly closed. Who. Follow that with no. Now, for a lot of you, especially my friends that have some British English training, okay, I know that's how a lot of people start. Notice that I'm not saying new. It's not new, it's no. It's going to go right from the N into the oo sound. So you don't need to add that E sound before. It's not you, it's just ooh. No. And that can take some practice. Okay, there's a very good tendency that if you normally say no, or if you normally say new, that's going to take some time to break. So what I recommend is recording yourself if you have an opportunity to, and just kind of listen to how you sound and compare it to how I sound. Okay. And if you're studying pronunciation, you really need to be recording yourself. Don't get me wrong, you're going to hate the sound of your voice at first. Most people do not like how they sound. But the more you practice and the more you record yourself, the more you kind of stop noticing, or you kind of stop caring. So I would really recommend doing that, because I think it's going to help. So again, compare how you say new to how I say it. And if you're saying new, try to take off that U. Try to keep your tongue static. You can hold the front of your tongue down against the bottom of your mouth. No. Okay. So when I just said new right there, I actually held the front of my tongue down here. No. But you may be asking, but how do you make the N sound if the front of your tongue is down? Well, what I'm doing is the front of my tongue is down, but the middle of my tongue is making contact with the top of my mouth instead. No. Okay. So that way I'm able to hold the front of my tongue down. And that's a technique you can use a lot with linking with N sounds to other sounds. I'm just keeping the front of your tongue down. Okay. So let's just take a look at all the oo sounds and the sounds. So again, we have who knew. So again, those are your oo words. Then we have cookbook. And then we have good food. Hello to people who are just jumping in. Okay, so we just talked about how to pronounce our vowel sounds. Let's now talk about, let's see if there's any linking going on. It's like, who knew? Not really much, a whole lot of linking there. Who knew that cookbook? So that cookbook. If you're, just say that section to yourself really quick. Repeat after me. That cookbook. If you say that right now to yourself, okay? That cookbook. If you're saying that to yourself, are you saying that cookbook, or are you saying that cookbook with lots of breaths? Most likely in English, when you hear a native speaker say this, you're actually going to use held sounds. So it's less likely that you're going to hear the breaths escape. So for instance, instead of saying that, you're probably going to get that. Instead of saying cook, you're probably going to get cook. And instead of book, you're probably just going to get book. So again, that cookbook, that cookbook, instead of that cookbook. Okay, see if you can hear the difference on the breaths there. Um, that's because, by the way, because you have words that end on consonants, your next word starts with consonants. So that means that typically you're not releasing those breaths. Okay. That's also going to be true for the last part as well. Had good food. Had good food. Again, those D sounds held, so you're not releasing the breath. Had good food. Um, who knew that cookbook had good food? We get the question in the YouTube chat. Are there any reductions here? So let's say the sentence at a more natural pace now. Okay, so our sentence again is who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food? I'm not personally getting a whole lot of necessarily like vowels changing because they're reduced. You do have words that are not stressed. So let's it might be easier to begin by talking about stress. What words in this sentence are stressed? Who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food? So again, this is another sentence where I would probably recommend two thought groups, two units of words that go together, which means that we would also expect to have two stresses. So I would probably stress cook and food. Who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food? And the reason for this, hello to Rumeza. Thanks for checking in again. Great to see you. Okay. Who knew that cookbook? That's your first unit. Cookbook is your stress, like I said, stressing cook. And, if you're not sure what words to stress in English, remember that typically it's going to be the last major content word in a thought group. So our thought group ends on who knew that cookbook. That's your first part of your sentence. Um, cookbook's a compound noun. So cook is probably going to get your stress. And then same thing with the second thought group, had good food. Food is your last major content word. It's your noun. So food is most likely going to get your stress. Who knew that cookbook had good food? You can always play with stress, like who knew that cookbook? Like if you're talking about a specific one, who knew that cookbook had good food? Like you could certainly change the stress too. But in a general situation, cook and food would be most likely your targets. So knowing the stresses, who knew that cookbook? So again, going back to the reductions question, I don't hear any reductions in terms of vowel sounds changing dramatically, but I do hear you have some parts that are going to be said faster, right? It's like who knew that? Who knew that? Who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cookbook? So just try saying that to yourself really quick. Who knew that? Who knew that? Who knew that? If you're very used to saying that as like who knew that or things like that, that's fine. It's understandable, but it's not necessarily capturing the way native speakers talk. So just a note about that. Um, and then the second thought group, had good food. Had good food. The had and the good probably not gonna be held super long, right? Because they're not stressed. So you're probably gonna say had good, had good. If you say like had good, again, fine, but maybe not the most natural sounding in terms of rhythm. Okay. Instead of had good food. So one last time to say the sentence, who knew that cookbook had good food? Hello to Jana checking us out on the Lang 8 stream. Okay, so that's how I would say our sentence, but you don't care how I say the sentence. You want to know how you're saying the sentence. So, what we're going to do, I have a bunch of audio files submitted by you. So, we're going to listen to files that you sent me and for this sentence, and we'll be discussing everything we just talked about. How are you doing the vowel sounds? How are you doing linking? How are you doing the stresses? All of those things and more. If you're watching on the Lang 8 stream and you want to send me an audio file, or you want to hear the audio files that I'm going to listen to, you need to check us out on YouTube. You need to go to youtube.com/fluentamerican and you will see our live stream. And that way you'll be able to see what I see and hear what I hear as we review your pronunciation. Hello to Jihoon. Thanks for checking us out. Okay, so you will see me put on my headphones so that way I can listen to what you guys have to say. As always, if you have specific questions about anything that I'm doing, you can let me know. You can post questions in the chat and things like that. And I'll be happy to respond. Juhoon asks, am I from Italia? No, I am not. I am in the United States currently. Okay. Hi to some other people. Denny's in the house. Hello, Denny. Great to see you again. And Hassan's made it. Hey, great to see you as well. Okay, so let's take a listen to your files. Let me share my screen. Let me get my headphones. Gonna have some fun with you guys. And let's take a look. Buongiorno, buonasera. My guess is if you're calling in from Korea, it's probably very, very late. My God, early morning. Okay, let me share. Okay, and if you do post a question, just give me a moment. I will be taking a look at the chat after we take a look. Okay. Jihoon mentions that mi chiamo Jihoon. Piacere, Jihoon. Io mi chiamo Jeff. Piacere. And let me share my screen and everything. 1 moment. All right, so you guys should now, if you're following on the Lang 8 stream, you should be able to see what I'm seeing, hear what I'm hearing. This is our first file. I think I'm doing it in reverse order from the way I sent it in. Also, just want to check and make sure I'm not missing anybody. I think I got it right. Okay, so let's listen to our first file and see how they say the sentence.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
Okay, I'm gonna play that one more time.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
So let's talk really quick about stresses.
Who knew?
Very heavy. Like who knew? Who knew? I would also say the placement's a little bit tense. Like who knew versus who knew. Let me play again.
Who knew?
Who knew versus who knew. Again, just try to get that a little bit more relaxed on your ooh sounds. Also, again, I probably wouldn't put a stress on these words here. I probably would have put the stress later. So instead of who knew, more who knew that in the next part.
Who knew that cookbooks had
That cookbook. That cookbook. So again, I probably would have put the stress on cook, like we said earlier. But this instead is getting kind of rush.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
And I think you also you changed the grammar a little bit. That cookbooks kind of talking about cookbooks in general, as opposed to who knew that cookbook. So I had it in singular, you made it in plural. That grammatically fine. It's just slightly different.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
I actually really like how you said cookbook. I think the
Who
vowel
knew
sounds are very
that
clear there.
cookbooks had
That cookbook.
Who knew that cookbooks had
Cookbook. I really like your sounds. I think that sounds great. Hello to Make Ru. Thanks for joining us. That cookbook. I really like your sounds. I think in terms of placement, I think they're coming from a great spot. I think the vowel sounds are really clear.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the ooh sound. You tend to go really tense, like who knew and food. I'm hearing like who knew food. Who knew food. See if you can hear that.
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
Okay. Versus who knew that cookbooks had good food. So again, the difference is that my placement is lower and it's more open. Okay. So I would, if you only had time to study one thing this week, I would study the ooh sound a little bit, just trying to get a little bit more relaxed and a little lower in your throat. Because right now it's just a little bit too tense. Okay. So again, instead of getting like an ooh, more of an ooh. Also, again, paying attention to the stresses. See if you can use the same stresses I use, because I think those would be a little bit more likely. It's not so often like that. I think you're going to get the stress on the who and the new part, honestly. Okay, so those are my major thoughts on that one. One more time, just listen to it. Again, my suggestion would be who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbooks had good food?
Okay, see if you hear the differences there. If you have questions about this, be sure to let me know. But thank you so much for sending your audio file. I can't do this without you, so I do appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, give you guys back your screen a moment just so I can check in on the chat. Okay. Hello to Douglas. Thanks for checking in. See you down here. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can also submit your audio file. Here is the link where you need to go to send it. I'll be happy to take a look at it. Okay. You'll also see at the top of the chat box if you're on YouTube, some people ask me some questions about some vowel sounds in different things. Someone was asking about TH sounds. Here's a video that's going to talk about linking them. THS practice. If it's hard for you to say a word like months, that tends to be a little bit tricky, right? So that's a video that you can check out. Talks about how to make that a little bit easier for you. Okay. Another person asked about, how do you make your English sound less flat? How do you add emotion to your speech when you're talking? It's a really big thing. What I see all the time with students is that everyone's kind of staying at the same level, kind of sounding a little bit robotic, a little bit like robots, because there's not enough pitch changes, not enough variation. So if you're trying to sound a little bit more natural, not just with pronunciation, but just in terms of how you sound, adding some emotion, sounding less flat. This is definitely a video that you want to check out. You can see that towards the top. Um, Also, of course, if you are enjoying this, you like getting feedback, you want to know what things you're mispronouncing or what things you could pronounce a little bit more naturally. We do practice just like this video every single day in our Patreon group. So if you go to patreon.com/fluent American, what you will do is be able to join our Telegram group. Okay. So I'll post a link to that. I see also that Hassan has asked a question. So let me get to that in a moment. Let's see. Can you explain how to pronounce barter and murder properly? It's like kind of like fast D sounds linking with R sounds. Yeah. So let's talk about that quickly. Um, so the first thing is let's just kind of talk about R's really quick. You want to make sure that again placement is not just for vowel sounds; it's for consonants too. That so for your R sounds, you want to make sure when you're pronouncing R that you're pronouncing it also from low in your throat and relaxed. What a lot of people are doing is they're saying things like or as opposed to Can you hear a difference between all three? The last one is the most natural. Okay, so making sure that for your R sounds that you're getting it from a low enough spot. Okay. R's are kind of tricky. So the back of your tongue is high, and the front of your tongue can either be high or it can be low. Kind of depends on the situation. Okay. And some students have trouble with that. They're like, okay, how do I raise the back of my tongue? What does that even mean? Like, how do you raise the back of your tongue? What does that feel like? And so, what I would say is that if that's hard for you, if you don't know what it means to raise the back of your tongue, make a G sound. Like, can you do like g, g? Just make that sound like g, like in I can't think of G words now, like glue, glue, g, g, or good again. You could just use that, right? Good, good. So for that G sound, what you're doing is you're raising the front of your tongue and you're lowering the front. Okay. The R sound is similar to that, but it doesn't have to go as high. So try doing like g, r, g, r, g, r. Just kind of doing combinations like that. Just trying to practice and making sure again that you're projecting from low in your throat. Again, if it's like that means you're kind of up here. If it's a that means you're kind of like around here. But if it's that means you're nice and low. Okay, so just kind of playing around with those R sounds a little bit. The next thing, so like let's so you use the examples of barter and murder. Okay. So let's the next thing I would recommend is see if you can just take off the T, take off the fast D sound. Just see if you can do the R. So like bar, excuse me, or like for the next word, like mer, just get comfortable with those R's, making sure that the R sounds are strong enough. Okay. Then we can start adding in the other parts. So like for instance, it might be helpful just to practice doing like a dir sound. So like dir. You can experiment with it too, you know. So sometimes you can use like a heavier D sound. So you can be like dir. Sometimes you can use a lighter, faster D sound like just kind of like raising and lowering your tongue very quickly, getting used to that. It's like der versus der. Okay. And then let's put it all together. So for instance, barter, murder. If you find that's a little bit difficult, you can start off by making your D sounds a little bit stronger. So for instance, barter, barter. And then as you get more comfortable with that, try saying it a little bit faster, especially the second syllable. Murder, barter, barter. Something else you really want to consider with these words, but pretty much any word in English. So this word has two syllables, right? The first syllable is your stress for both of them. So that's the syllable you need to really make sure you get right. Okay, so like the bar and the mer, those are the words that you really want to make sure are clear. The second syllables, you can kind of, I don't want to say like don't concentrate on them or don't make them sound good, but you don't need to make them sound perfect. You can go faster on them, and as long as you don't draw too much attention to it, you'll be fine. So, for instance, murder, murder. You know, I'm not saying murder, right? I'm just saying murder or barter, barter. You know, I'm not saying barter, I'm saying barter. Okay. So, as long as your first syllable is clear and your second syllable has a noticeable R sound, although slight. You'll be okay. Okay. Murder, barter. Okay. So just a note. Just something to consider. It's like murder, barter. Okay. Hopefully that helps. Hassan, let me know if you have some more questions about that. Okay. Um, Douglas makes the mention that fricatives and th sounds don't match well together. Yeah, I mean they can definitely be tricky, right? So, for instance, hello, disease. Obeta's in the house. I see your question too. Give me a moment. I'll be right there. So that video that I have, again, I posted it towards the top of the chat. If you have trouble with those fricatives, definitely check out this linking with th. Okay. Or even here, linking like a th to an s. Okay. So the key is making sure that your th sound is long enough. Don't rush your th. As soon as you hear the th, then you can move on to your next sound. Okay, so that's the first thing. The other thing that's going to be helpful with ths is again making sure that your tongue's not between your teeth. Make sure it's just lightly touching your top front tooth, very very light. So for instance, doing a combination like a combination like that, that's a th followed by an s. Getting comfortable with that, and then you can speed it up. So instead of doing like you can do like combinations like that. You can also do the opposite, right? Like an s to a th, like where you start with an s, like for instance, or the z sound. So for instance, if we look at a sentence like let's check out a sentence like this, right? So for instance, he's thin. He's thin. It's just doing the opposite, starting high and then slowing it down. It's like he's thin. Combinations like that. If you want more practice with that, again, check out our video here. Okay. So Beta asks, could I read the sentence, please? So Beta is late to class. See, late to class. What do you do with your students when your students come late? Let's take a look at this sentence. Who knew that Cookbook had good food? Who knew that Cookbook had good food? Okay. You can also rewind in the stream too to the very beginning where I go over some of the nuances for that. Okay. Yeah. Hassan says they curl the front of the tongue. Again, there's nothing wrong with curling the front of your tongue. Again, for lots of R sounds, that's how I do it. But there are some R sounds where it's actually a little easier if you keep the front of your tongue down. Okay, so the problem isn't necessarily with the front of your tongue. Just a note. Denny asks, very important question. What does a cookbook mean? Very good question. Yeah, cookbook is it's a book that basically contains different cooking recipes. So if you're trying to learn something new, I know many of you grew up in the age of YouTube and things like that. So back in the past, people had books with recipes written in them when they wanted to cook something new. So that's what a cookbook is. Those books you could turn to with recipes and things. Okay. We have the question here, cop versus caught. Do vowel sounds similar? Ooh, good question. So this is dealing with something you may have heard before called the caught merger. Okay, also the Great Midwestern Vowel Shift. So what's the difference between them? So the question really is it depends on who you ask. If you ask my wife, she will tell you they sound the same, and then she'll hit me. She doesn't actually hit me. Guys, if you're seeing this, I know you don't hit me. But if you ask me, yeah, they sound very different. They're two completely different sounds. So it really depends on the part of the country that you go to. I'll put it this way. There are no words really where if you use an ah sound as opposed to an aw sound, people will get confused. Okay, so it's not in terms of pronunciation sounds to study. The aw sound is pretty low on the list. There's other sounds that are way more important that can cause more confusion, like short I, long I, or sound versus oo sounds, things like that. Okay. But let's say that you want to sound just like me from Philadelphia on the East Coast of the United States. Then you would pronounce these differently. The first word would sound like cop with an ah, cop, where I'm just opening my mouth wide and my tongue is low. If I can get a good shot in the camera, you should be able to see into my throat, like ah. It's my big old mouth right there, right? Ah. Okay. But for the ah sound, ah, I see. Ah, ah. Notice how much it's a little hard to see. Ah, ah, ah. You can't see as far back into my mouth because the back of my tongue is high. Okay. So it's the difference between ah and ah. So for instance, that first word I would pronounce as cop with an ah sound. Cop. Hello to Andre checking in on the language stream. The second word I would pronounce as caught. Caught. So again, cop versus caught. Cop, caught, caught, and things like that. Okay. But again, you don't have to do that. If you say cop and caught, that's fine. People don't understand you. You know, that's the other thing with pronunciation too is context. Context is more important than anything. People understand you in the right context, even if you're mispronouncing things. It's okay, Denny. That's part of language learning. We have our mental lapses, or even just I mean, it happens to me in English all the time too. Um, let's see a little bit and get this tricky. Yeah, let's see comments on the R sound. You know, everyone has trouble with the R sounds. I have a video that may be helpful that looks at 5 different R sounds. So if this is a sound that you're often having some trouble with, um, I would definitely recommend checking out this video. It also is an analysis video too, so it's looking at a video from a Greek basketball player named Giannis. So if you have some trouble with R sounds, I would definitely recommend checking out that video for 5 different R sounds and things, and some practice with that. Okay. Then yes, I ever watched King of the Hill. Yeah, King of the Hill is actually it's a pretty good show. Or we're going to talk about Boomhauer. Boomhauer like talk like this all the time. So you hard to know what he's saying, but you know you can't after a while. That's Boomhauer from the show. That's how he talks. Yeah, so if you want some practice with some Texan English, how they speak down south, that's definitely a good show to check out. Okay, but enough about me and enough about King of the Hill for a moment. Let's go back to our sentence. So again, our sentence, in case you're just checking in, we're looking at this sentence. Who knew that Cookbook had good food? We're talking about how to say this. You guys are sending me audio files. If you want me to look at your audio file, we certainly can do that. You need to go to this document here, and it will have all the steps you need to take to send me your pronunciation file. But let's take a look at our second one. Okay. Denny, I see your file just got added, which is great. Let me share my screen and audio some more. Okay. I appreciate that. Oh, whoops, pressed the wrong button. If you can't come on time, don't come. Wow, Zameta's harsh. Zameta's harsh. My God. No. Everyone is welcome at any time. I know we're adults. We have things to do. I understand that we have lives. I appreciate you guys spending a little bit of your Saturday with me. All right, let's listen to this next file. Get some suggestions.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Oh wow. Okay.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Hear that one more time.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Okay, I think you hit the stresses. So I'm hearing the stress on cook, and I'm also hearing the stress on food, which is great. Those are the words I would recommend stressing.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Your pitch is very high.
Who knew that?
Who knew that? Who knew that? It feels like artificially high. Remember, in general, in American English, whether you're a male speaker or a female speaker, your pitches are going to be a little bit lower than in your first language, most likely, okay, for a lot of first language groups. So the effect that this has.
Who knew that?
Who knew that? You're very tense. Your placement's high and tense. Hear that first part, like who knew that? Who knew that? Who knew that?
Who knew that?
Who knew that? Versus who knew that? Excuse me. Hear a difference between those, like who knew that versus who knew that. So especially on the new, I would really recommend trying to get your placement a little bit lower. So say new, more no, new, who knew that. See if you can say it like this: who knew that? Who knew that? And say who knew that? More who knew that? Who knew that?
Who knew that Cookbook had?
Cookbook. Cookbook. I do like your stress on cook. I think that sounds great.
Cookbook had
Cookbook. Could probably even actually hold your vowel sounds a little bit longer.
cookbook had
Cookbook. Your K sounds are kind of taking over a little bit. Who knew that? Cookbook versus cookbook. The vowel sounds are really the part that you want to be strong. Okay, so I would say just hold your vowels just a touch longer.
who knew that cookbook had
And even for the first part,
who knew that cookbook
who knew that cookbook versus who knew that cookbook. So in addition to lowering your placement, I would recommend holding your vowel sounds just a little bit longer. And notice how that's going to change the sound. Instead of who knew that cookbook, more who knew that cookbook, who knew that cookbook.
had good food.
Had good versus had good. And again, difference is placement, but also I'm holding the vowel sounds a little bit longer. Had good.
Had good food.
And then food, your placement's a little tense. It's like food versus food. So it's not food, it's food. You're almost making food into a diphthong.
Food.
It's like food. Do you hear that movement on your vowel? Like food, food. That's a lot of movement. This isn't a diphthong. It's one sound. So it's going to say ooh the whole time. Food, food. So instead of food, it's more food. Had good food.
Food.
Okay, so those would be my biggest suggestions for this. Okay, so again, I would read this as who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Yeah. The other thing too is we talked a little bit about pitches. Having more variation. This is like right now it's like especially this part here, if I can find it.
Cookbook had good food.
Dude, had good food, had good food, like had good. I would probably lower that again. It's a had good, had good. So notice that on food, you're probably gonna have a falling intonation. Had good food. You know, that cookbook had good food. Food, falling intonation. So what typically happens with intonation is if I'm falling on the last word, I'll probably have a slight rise before it. I'll do the opposite right before it. So if I'm falling last, then I may want to rise a little bit before it. It's like good food, had good food, had good food. Kind of that sort of rhythm. Had good food, had good food. Who knew a cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Because right now you're kind of like had good versus had good food. Kind of like that. So just watch out for those movements and things. Okay, so those would be my big suggestions for you there. Thank you so much for sending your audio. Let me know again in the comments or in the chat box if anything is not clear. I appreciate it. All right, just checking in again on the chat, see if I missed anything. And there's still time, of course, to send in your audio files if that's something that interests you. Okay. Okay, let's take a look. Plan to live in the if this is certainly not just you. There's plenty of people that learn American English but move to the UK, or the opposite. People that studied British English for years, maybe all their schooling, but then decide to move to the US, and it's tricky. There are many kinds of English, I think if this happens and you move to the UK, just understand that will that have an impact on your pronunciation? Yeah, probably. There's probably gonna be some things that are gonna sound a little bit more American. There's probably gonna be some things that sound a little bit more British. I think people tend to pick up on the traits of wherever they're currently situated, especially if they're immersed in it. So if you get immersed into like a British community there, don't be surprised if some of that starts impacting your pronunciation to a degree. Okay. No, that was not Zobeda just yet. Zobeda has a I feel like your voice kind of reminds me of like Nina Simone. It's like kind of like a lower voice. And this is definitely a tricky sentence to say. Yeah. Yeah, and that's exactly what happens when you're exposed to different accents and pronunciations is people tell you that, oh, you sound like this, but then other people from that place may say, no, you sound like this. So you're kind of in this gray area that's constantly shifting. I think that's a very common experience with pronunciation. Okay, let's move on to our next file then. Oh wow, this is like the exact opposite. This next one is Our last one had very high pitches. This next one's going to have some very low pitches. Turn on your bass if you're a bass person. I know I like bass. I want my floor to shake when I'm listening to your audio files. Let's do this. Give me one sec. All right, let's take a listen to this.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food? Do you hear that, like that second half of that where the consonant sounds are taking over? The vowel sounds become shorter and the the consonants take over. So it's like had good food. Like it's very choppy.
The cookbook had good food.
It's like cookbook had good food. Like, do you hear that? I'm exaggerating a bit, but that's kind of what I'm hearing. That's the rhythm you're going to get. Cookbook had good food versus cookbook had good food. What's the difference? I'm just giving my vowels time to breathe. Because if you kind of want to avoid that heavy consonant kind of hold your vowels longer. And also make your consonants a little bit weaker. Okay, so that's the very first thing I'm going to recommend is just hold your vowel sounds longer. Again, I can't stress this enough. English listeners are listening for your vowel sounds. That's the part that's most helpful. Let's listen to this again.
Who knew that cookbook?
Who knew that cookbook? So again, lowering your placement.
Who knew that?
You hear that new versus no? Again, a little lower placement on new would have been helpful. Who knew? Who knew? So again, just trying to get that from lower in your throat, a little bit more relaxed. I think it would be good.
That cookbook.
And say cookbook, more cookbook. Again, holding your vowel sounds. Hello, the best on the Lang 8 stream. Best, if you want to hear what I'm hearing and see what I'm seeing, you can check us out at youtube.com/fluentamerican. Okay, otherwise, you can just listen to the feedback I give right now.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Cookbook. The other thing too is that it's like cookbook had good food. Who knew that cookbook? I think you're stressing the right word.
Who knew that cookbook had?
You know, you're putting the stress on the right word. You're putting it on cook, and I can tell because you're raising the pitch, which is great. So again, to show stress in English, you need to do two things. You need to raise the pitch a bit higher, and you also need to hold the vowel sound a little bit longer. But you're not doing that second part. You're doing the first part. You're raising the pitch, but you're not holding the vowel.
Who knew that cookbook had?
It's like cookbook. So you need to hold that sound in cook, especially. If you don't hold it anywhere else, at least hold it in cook. Who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cookbook?
Had good food.
And then again, your oo sounds are still a little bit tense. So again, like food versus food. Hear a difference between food and food. Big difference again is just placement. Lower in the throat, more relaxed. Okay. And you know, if you're watching this and you've never heard of placement before, or you're like, but Jeff, how do I lower my placement? You keep saying this, but I'm not doing it right. Explain it now. if you're like that, you know, so some techniques to do. You can start off with like a tense vowel sound and then just try to move it around. So for instance, I'm going to take an oo sound and just try to lower it. So for instance, like ooh, ooh. So again, I started high and I sent it down. Also, as I sent it down, I tried to open up my throat. If I don't open up my throat, if I keep it tense, it's going to sound like ooh, ooh. So I lowered the placement, but it stayed tense. And that's, you know, I'm doing half the work, but I'm not doing the full thing. You want to be lower, but also relaxed. So again, it's the difference between doing ooh and ooh, ooh. Okay. So again, just trying to open up your throat more and get more relaxed with the air. Okay. So those are, again, would be my biggest suggestions for this audio file here. So again, for the sentence, I would say this as, who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay, so just a note there. I hope that's helpful. If you have questions on anything that's not clear, just let me know in the chat or in the comments after the stream. Thank you so much for sending your audio. I cannot do this without you. I'm going to check in really quick on my chat friends. Make sure everything's going cordially. Okay. Take a quick look. This is going to move into the hard sentence. So the ones which have D and T at the end of the words. Can I speak with so many pauses? You know, that's really interesting that you mentioned about pauses. Because that's something I would really recommend. I would try to shadow people that have fewer pauses, honestly. So I would try to listen to people that don't have as many pauses in their speech and really try to capture that same rhythm. Also, I would also practice held sounds more because that's just such a common way to link words together. And that'll help remove some of those like those breaths that also may be appearing in your speech. Another thing that you can do is when you're pausing, and I think I mentioned this before, but when you're pausing when you're talking, um, one way to just make those pauses sound more natural is to hold the final sound before you pause. So like if I'm talking like this, I might just hold the vowel sound a little longer before I start talking again. So like situations like that. Notice how I'm holding the vowel sounds more. And that just kind of helps join together your thought groups in a way that sounds more natural than like a pause. So just a note on that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and again, those K sounds again, just holding sounds, holding your breath on consonants is super helpful to sounding more natural. Yeah. Hello to Alex checking in on the Lang 8 stream. Thanks for joining us today. Take a look at your audio files and giving some suggestions, as we often do. Again, if you're just joining us on YouTube, welcome. We are taking a look again at pronunciation files you send me. We're looking at this sentence: who knew that cookbook had good food? If you want me to review your pronunciation, that's great. You can check us out again at youtube.com/fluentamerican. Check out the live stream there. You're going to see that I have a link. You can go to this link. It'll have instructions there where you can send in your own pronunciation file. Okay, so then we can hear it and give some feedback. Don't be shy. We're not here to judge. We're just here to provide some feedback. Okay. Also, like I mentioned before, if you're enjoying this, if you like getting feedback on your pronunciation and you want to do this every day of the week, we do this in our pronunciation Telegram group. Okay. You can join at patreon.com at patreon.com/fluentamerican. Okay. We'll talk about how to become a member there. I'm trying to keep it affordable per month. Okay. Let's go back to more of your audio files. Again, our sentence is, who knew that cookbook had good food? I'm going to share my screen again. Very dramatic reading. I think this is from Marcos. Sharing my screen and my audio. Okay, let's take a listen to this one here.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Let's listen to that again.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
How many thought groups? Just kind of curious. How many thought groups do you hear in this sentence?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
I'm going to play it one more time. My question is again, how many thought groups do you hear?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
So I'm hearing 4, and I'll show you where I'm hearing them.
Who knew
Thought group.
that cookbook
2,
had
3,
good food?
4. Okay, so those are the 4 that I'm hearing. I would cut these down. I think you have a few too many pauses. And I think when you have more pauses, that's also adding more stresses to your sentence. There's nothing wrong with having more stresses in your sentence. But what I will say is that I do think a lot of people who learn English tend to have more thought groups and more stresses than a lot of native speakers do. And if you have more thought groups and if you have more stresses, the effect that has is it makes your sentence a lot choppier. It never has a chance to flow because every time it's about to flow, it's getting stopped, it's getting interrupted, and then things like that. So I would cut down on your thought groups. I would cut down on the stresses. That's probably going to be my biggest suggestion for this. So for instance, here.
Who knew that cookbook?
So you're stressing new and you're stressing that. Neither of those is the stress that I would have done. Again, I would have done cookbook. Says of who knew that cookbook. I again probably would have done who knew that cookbook. Who knew that cookbook?
Who knew?
And again, I mentioned earlier about British English and the oo sound. This is kind of what it sounds like ew, new.
Who knew?
New versus no. Clear difference between new and no. Okay, trying to again not add that initial like almost long I sound before the oo.
Who knew?
New versus no. Okay.
That cookbook.
That cookbook. Again, I would have changed stress.
Had good food.
Actually, in general, in terms of placement, aside from the no, a little bit high intense. In general, I like the placement here.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Yeah. And I also would have taken the stress off of had good food. I would just stress food. Okay. So those would be my biggest suggestions. I think just cut down on your thought groups, cut down on your stresses, change your stresses, and watch out for no, that ooh sound on new. Those would be my biggest thoughts there. Okay. Thank you as always for sending this audio file. I can't do this without you, and I do appreciate it. Okay, a couple more files to take a look at. And it's also not too late. I see some more people have been adding them, which is great, from Denny through Z. I'll be taking a look at those in a moment. Of course, also, if you have some pronunciation questions that I can help with, now is a great time to ask as well. Okay. Let's see what's going on. So Beta says that their file deletes all of the ending consonants. Interesting. Don't change it. I want to hear what that sounds like. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. See? Yeah, consonants that ends of words. I mean, it's this tricky balance because if you make them too strong, they really disrupt your flow. But if you just take them off completely, you're changing your words. You know, you're saying something completely different. So there's definitely this fine balance between, you know, a consonant sound, especially at the end of a word that's pronounced well, and one that's a little bit too exaggerated or not strong enough. Okay. Yeah. Not sure. Yeah, I mean, I personally think it has a lot to do with the first languages that people speak. Different languages pay attention to different things. I'll use Italian as an example because it's what I have the most experience with. Italian is a language that focuses more on consonant sounds. And in fact, for like American English speakers learning Italian, there tends to be a lot of issue with things like Italian is a concept called like double consonants where you can pronounce them together. So for instance, a word in English like little has two T's, but to an Italian ear listening to American English, it would just sound like one sound, you know, because American English doesn't have double consonants. We just say little. We don't pronounce it twice. So it's not little or things like that, you know. So that's really a difficult concept for people going from American English to Italian, or pretty much people speaking American English going to any other language where the emphasis is more on consonant sounds. That tends to be a challenge. In general, it's easier for American English speakers to go into languages with the vowel sounds. That tends to be a little bit easier. A lot of languages don't have as many vowel sounds as English does. Okay. Okay, moving on then. I think we're caught up on the chat. People editing their files. We also have the big question. Oh my gosh. We always I love the questions because we always get like these huge, not existential questions, but these huge questions that like how can I answer these in like a one live stream, right? The question, how can I sound more American? We'll try our best to tackle that. But that's a great question for you guys as well in the chat. See if you can answer our friend Dan's question. How can you sound more American? What would be your suggestions? If you had to give him some suggestions, and we can discuss that a little bit more. Okay, let's listen to more files. Oh man, this one goes swinging right into it from the very first word. I'm excited to hear it. I know you are too. Let's take a listen to this. Okay, let's listen to this.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Essentially, you put the stress on had, kind of like our last friend. You know, if you put the stress on had, that cookbook had good food. What does that mean if you put the stress on had? Well, that means that you're emphasizing the past. That cookbook had good food. It almost makes it sound like the cookbook changed. Like, oh, like 20 years ago, that cookbook used to have good food. It had good food. Now the cookbook has horrible recipes, but in the past, man, it had great recipes. So that's kind of what changes a bit if you change the stress, if you put the stress on had. So just a note about that might be doing something that you don't intend to. Stress is really tricky because if you change the stress, you do change the meaning of your sentence. Just be careful with that. Let's listen again.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Yeah, and again, I think you have a few too many thought groups. Your sentence never gets a chance to flow. Because you're like, who knew that cookbook had good food? Like you're kind of like bouncing from one way to the other. So you never really give yourself you never give yourself a chance to flow.
Who knew that cookbook?
So you're stressing new.
Who knew that?
Also, watch out for, again, that new sound. We talked a lot about how to pronounce that, so take a listen to earlier in the stream. So, like how to say new.
Who knew that cookbook?
Cookbook. In general, I like your sounds on cookbook.
Cookbook.
You could probably just hold your vowels just a little longer. Sounds a little bit fast. You could probably just hold them just a touch longer.
Cookbook had good food.
Had good food versus had good food. So again, I would recommend stressing food.
Had good food.
Had good food versus had good food. Yeah, so I think that's my biggest suggestions relate more to stresses and cutting down on your thought groups. Because I think you have a few too many. Who knew that cookbook had good food? That's kind of what I'm hearing. Versus who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food? So that's personally how I would say it. But yeah, I think you can listen to some of the earlier comments we had for some thoughts on that. But thank you so much for sharing that audio. If anything's not clear, you can let me know in the comments or post something afterwards, and I will see it. Okay, but thank you so much for sharing. Okay, I have two more from our original group. Then we will take a look at the next people. Okay. See what else is going on. Maybe when you stress the word had. Yeah, so there definitely was some stress there. Short I. Okay, so good question. So just a quick note about short vowels and long vowels. I know that they say short and I know that they say long. And when you think of short and long, you're thinking of like duration or time or length. I get it. But don't really view them as that. Short vowels and long vowels can be said for the same amount of time. Okay, it's really just kind of the name given to the vowel. So don't associate them with time. Because it's really just a name. Okay, don't focus on it too much. But this question, Alexi, are you our singer person? Are you the person that leaves us singing messages? Is this you? Is this why you're curious? Is it possible to sing short vowels? What happens with short I when singing? It does not. You want to maintain the same vowel sound. Short I's never become long I's. It never happens. Or let me rephrase. It shouldn't happen. A lot of students make it happen, but it shouldn't happen. A short I is a distinct vowel sound. It's not going to become a long vowel sound. Okay, it should always stay short. Okay. So like you want to keep it as short as, so it's like, for instance, if you're singing the word sing, like sing, I'm a horrible singer, so you don't want to hear that, but like no, it's going to stay at a short I sound. It's not going to change. So just a note about that. Don't go changing your vowel sounds just because you're singing. That does not give you the right. Singing does not give you the right to change your vowel sounds. How dare you? No, just kidding. Had good. Who knew the cookbook had good food? That's interesting. So you're saying that it makes it sound surprised. I don't think, I'm thinking about that. Would putting the stress on had make it sound more emphasized or surprised? I don't know. Like if I were saying that surprised, like, oh, who knew that cookbook has such a good, if I were sounding surprised, I would probably add some words like such, like, oh, who knew that cookbook has such good food? Or like, I think your emphasis would still be on food. One thing that you could do to show surprise is you may do like a kind of like a rise fall or something, like instead of just food who knew that cookbook had good food. That's kind of your normal way with a falling intonation on food. But if I wanted to like add some emotion to that, I might do like a rise fall, like who knew that cookbook has good food, had such good food, like food. Do you hear that kind of rise versus just food, which is just a fall? Food, which is like a fall rise. Okay, so I think that would help. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if putting the stress on had would necessarily change to show surprise. But again, it's just my opinion. Okay. Thank you, Alexi. You didn't answer my question. Are you our masked singer? Are you the one that's hiding and sending us singing audio files? That's you. There's always interesting question. Okay, so what word should I stress in the sentence if I don't want to emphasize any word? Why don't you want to emphasize any word? I'll rephrase. English is stress timed. You can't just, something is always going to receive emphasis. If your question is, I want to make the sentence sound neutral, the way that you can make a sentence sound most neutral is you can stress the last content word. So, for instance, if I want to say our original sentence in a way that is not really emphasizing anything in particular, just sounds neutral, then I would again stress food because that's the standard spot. And if you follow standard stress patterns, it sounds neutral. Okay. It's like, who knew that cookbook had good food? Stress food. Okay. But you can't just take the stress off of everything. English doesn't quite work like that. Something is still going to sound stressed, which can make things worse because now it's maybe you're stressing something you didn't intend to. So just a note about that. That cookbook had good food. Who knew? Yeah. The stress in that case, it's almost like a tag question. Like, who knew? Yeah. So the stress would fall on new. Exactly. That's exactly right. Okay. And good hypothetical situation there. All right, let's move on. So I have a class upcoming in about 30 minutes. So I want to try to make sure we get through everyone's audio files. And in case you're watching this and you just jumped in, welcome. I'm Jeff with Fluent American. We're taking a look at your pronunciation files. And you can send in your file to get analyzed by following the directions that you see here on the screen. Okay. It'd be great to hear them. Do get them in soon, though, because I'm going to have to close new submissions very soon. Okay, let's take a look at our next file. By the way, guys, I've said it before, but I really do mean it. Thank you for sending your files. I can't do this without you. Listen to our next one.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Right now, your language is coming off as very robotic. You're using one tone throughout your whole speech, almost. It's like, who knew that cookbook had good food? Everything's the same. Okay. In English, it's going to be hard to make that sound natural because English always has variation. Sometimes you're going higher, sometimes you're going lower, sometimes you're going faster, slower, things like that. So my very first thing to you is for your words that are stressed, you want to raise the pitch on them.
Who knew that cookbook?
Because I would have raised the pitch more on cook. So let's see how that would have changed things.
Who knew that?
So who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cookbook?
Cookbook.
Versus cookbook. Who knew that cookbook versus who knew that cookbook? Notice the difference?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Had good food. I would even say for food, you changed food, so you did play with it. You added some contrast, but your contrast was in length. You held it longer.
Had good food.
Had good food. You want to raise the pitch a little higher on that as well. Had good food. Had good food. Another thing you can do too is add more intonation. Make your intonation a little bit sharper. This is the last word of your question. This is an information question. So you're gonna have falling intonation. So instead of food, it'll be more food. Food. You can make your intonation a little bit sharper, and that will also add some contrast.
Good food.
I say food, more food. Food. Okay. Had good food. So I raised the pitch, made the intonation a little bit sharper. Let's listen to that again.
Who knew?
Again, we have the case of the British ooh sound. I'm hearing like new versus no.
Who knew that?
Do you hear that? Who knew?
Who knew?
I'm hearing new. Who knew versus who knew?
Who knew that cookbook?
The other thing too is that you don't have I mentioned earlier that in terms of reductions, there's no major word here that's getting reduced, but there are words that you're going to say faster. And right now you're saying that a little bit too long. That is a word in this case that's not really getting emphasis. So you can say that faster.
Who knew that cookbook?
Because notice that every word you're saying right now is kind of held for the same amount of time. Who knew that cookbook? English doesn't work like this. Stressed words held longer. Not stressed, you need to say it faster. Who knew that cookbook? So instead of doing who knew that, more who knew that, who knew that. Okay. Another way to think about this is that in the amount of time that it takes you to say who knew that, you should also be able to say cook. Who knew that cook? Who knew that cook? Okay. Don't think of it as every word needs to be pronounced super clearly and held for the same amount of time, because that's not going to work.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
And again, food is your stress. So had good should be faster than the way you say food. Had good food. Had good food. Okay. So those are the things I really would recommend playing with in this sentence. Okay. If anything there is not clear, again, send me a message or a chat or something like that. But thank you for sharing your audio file. I do appreciate it. Can't do this without you. Okay, stopping back in the chat, see if there's anything I am missing. I hate missing out on things in my own stream. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, we talked about that. Oh, Denny, thank you, man. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. And I appreciate that too, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, guys. I do appreciate that. Okay. One way is to show your support. Just liking the stream is helpful. Or after the stream's posted, leaving a little comment. Yeah, that's really cool. Raina, thank you so much for sending your video. I appreciate that. Cool. Kind words. You guys are sending the love. You guys are so sweet. Thanks. I keep telling myself I wouldn't cry. Let's take a look at so again, our sentence again, in case you've forgotten how I would say this. Who knew that cookbook had good food? Let's take a look at our. And again, if you want to send your audio file, time is ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Come on. Send your files because you are running out of time if that's something you're interested in. Let's actually have to load up our next batch. Okay. Unfortunately, this next audio file is going to have some slight issues with the audio. So I don't want to play it too much. I'll play it twice just so you can hear it. But we'll try to get some quick feedback for this. Definitely check your audio files to make sure they're coming in as clearly as possible. If it were just me listening to your file, that's one thing. I'm happy to bear with it. But, we're doing this during the stream and other people are hearing it. So I want to make sure that's a pleasant experience for everybody. All right, let's listen to this.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay. Similar thing. I have similar comments to this as I do for the previous one. I'll let them play it again and see if you can guess what those are.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay. Just in terms of rhythm, what I'm hearing is like do 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 do. Very choppy, right? Do, do, do. Especially like that second half. I'm gonna play this one last time and then we'll just discuss.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Especially from Cookbook. Cookbook had good food. Cookbook had good food. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Cookbook had good food versus Cookbook had good food. Cookbook had good food. So giving your vowel sounds more chance to breathe. Okay. You need to hold your vowels longer and you need to play with your pitches a little bit more because right now you're kind of staying at the same point for every single word. And that's making this sound really flat. Cookbook had good food. Cookbook had good food. Do you hear the variation in that? Like cookbook had good food. I'm going up. Cookbook had. So it's like 3 steps, right? Cookbook had good food. And I'm going up again. Cookbook had good food. You need more movement because right now you're kind of staying. You're very comfortable at this kind of flat level. And that's never going to let you sound natural. Okay. You have to have more variation. Another thing too is like notice how I'm saying like cookbook had good food. Where are my D sounds? Do you guys hear the D's? Had good food. With reductions, with words that are not stressed, you can get away with pronunciation that isn't entirely clear. Yeah, so Beowulf, if I'm pronouncing that right. Yeah, exactly. It sounds like had good food. So it's instead of saying had good food, where those G sounds are kind of strong, and reductions, because none of these words is stressed. I can say them faster. I can say them a little muddier or less clearly. And you'll still understand me because of context. You'll understand that the vowel sounds will be close enough to words you already know that you won't even notice. Cookbook had good food. Okay, had good food. So notice that. Okay. So I think your sounds are coming in too clearly. Get a little messier with your English because right now it's a little bit too clear. Okay. And again, just for the audio portion of that, not going to repeat that, but thank you for sending the audio files. If anything's not clear, play it back so you can hear that again. Okay. But thank you for sending it. I do appreciate it. Okay, let's listen to our next file. And again, if you're watching on Lang 8 and you want to get in on the action, you want to hear what I'm hearing and see what I'm seeing, you can go to youtube.com/fluentamerican and you'll see my files. Okay, I have a class in about 20 minutes, so we're about to do our blitz mode. We're trying to get through as many as possible. Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you. Let's take a look again. So I have Denny's. I'm just going to load up these really quick. Give me a moment just to listen because I don't want you guys to hear things I don't want you to hear. Okay. Denny, I think you exaggerate your stresses a little bit. No, we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay. Hassan sounds good. Just from Marina's. I want to check that. Marina's a little fast, but okay. So Beta, checking this out. Okay, so you got you. This is for Dan. I think you guys will like that one. Okay. Oh, wow. There's another one. Okay. And we also have a question in the document that they want an American girlfriend. So how can you get an American girlfriend? If you guys have thoughts on how to get an American girlfriend, you can share those. I don't want to show all my cards, but I think you guys, if you stay till the end, I do think you will enjoy what you will hear. Okay. One, I can answer the girlfriend thing really quick. One website that apparently is used a lot for language learners trying to just get random hookups with people from other countries is was it Tandem, I think. Yes, I'll check those out. Nas88 asks, in the Lang 8 stream, you'll see my eyes wander for a minute. Are you streaming elsewhere? Yes. If you go to youtube.com/fluentamerican, you will be able to hear what I am hearing and see what I'm seeing. So you can see our visuals as well. Also, get on Tinder. Tinder is also an option. I don't know. I've never used Tinder before. My wife will be happy to hear that. I've never used Tinder before. She says she is happy to hear that. I don't know if they have filters for like different things like languages and stuff like that. I mean, that could be an option. I don't know. Yeah, I'm honestly not going to be the best person to answer that question. Okay. Let's do this. I think that I have enough time to get through these audio files. So I do think I have to close the submissions for sending audio files at this time. If we didn't get to you this time, I'm sorry, but keep this document, save the document where you can submit the audio files because this is the same document we use all the time. So for our next stream, you can be one of the first to submit an audio file. Just keep refreshing it every day and eventually I'll have the new question up. Okay. But thank you to everyone who has sent files. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And we're going to work backwards because we have surprises. All right. Sharing audio, sharing everything, drinking water. Raina asks, is the British U more tense? That is a difference between British English and American English. American English's placement is low and relaxed, whereas British English tends to be a little higher towards the top of the throat. British English, in a lot of ways, is a lot closer to a lot of other languages, especially in Europe. A lot of European languages tend to have placement that's higher. So that's one way you can immediately make yourself sound more British is raising your placement and getting a little tenser. And one way to immediately sound more American is to lower your placement and just be more relaxed. Okay. Americans are also just like a lot more chill. I don't know if that's true or not. Let's take a look. Okay. Ang on Lang 8 asks, can I add you? I don't even know what it means to be added. Yeah, if it doesn't hurt me, I think that's okay. So that's all I ask. And again, if you're following on Lang 8, you can go to youtube.com/fluentamerican to to see what I'm seeing and hear what I'm hearing. All right, let's listen to this file really quick. Okay.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay, Danny, I think this is you. Let me play again.
Who knew that cook?
Let's play that really quick. Almost sounds like you're slurring a little bit. Like, who knew that? Who knew that? So I think I know what you're doing. I think you're really focused on being relaxed, which is great. Okay.
Who knew that?
Who knew that? It's like, who knew that? The issue is that
Who knew that?
it's like, who knew that? Who knew that? You also need to get it lower. Because, like, for instance, how you're saying new.
Who knew that?
It's like no. So it's relaxed. I can feel the air, which is great. I think you're doing that step great. But I want it to go lower. So it's the difference between saying like "nah" and "no." Nah, no. Can you hear a difference there? So again, try to get the sound just a little bit lower in your throat. Okay.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
That cookbook.
Who knew that cookbook?
Cookbook. Yeah, so it's not, this is the big thing. I think you're getting the relaxed part great, which is that's huge because an issue that a lot of my Italian students have is they there's a tendency to be very tense. Okay, so I don't think you have that issue. I want you to get lower because right now you're kind of staying up around here, like who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cook? Versus who knew that cook? 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 Just try and get it just a step lower. I think is going to make a pretty dramatic change.
Who knew that cookbook had?
Like, so here cookbook versus cookbook, lower.
Cookbook had good food.
Also with the had good.
Had good food.
It's like had good. I would say I would practice held sounds a little bit more. I would like you to hold your D's a little bit more. So instead of had good, more had good. Try to get that sort of sound. So I think a held sound on your D's would be really helpful.
Cookbook had good food.
And then food just sounded a little bit tenser to me. It's not as relaxed as some of your other sounds. So it's not food. It's more food. Okay. Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay, so yeah, those would be my big suggestions. Just try to take it a step lower in terms of your placement. I think your stresses are fine. I think in terms of relaxing your sounds, I think those are general okay. But those are the things I would take a look at. Okay. Let me know if that makes sense or doesn't make sense, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Okay. Thank you for sending the audio. Hello to Anne with an E. She's back. Great to have you again. It's in the Lang 8 stream. Let's take a listen to our next one.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay, let me hear again.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay, in general, I think that this is an example of, I think it's a little bit lower than the previous one. Because there are some times where it goes a little higher and gets a little tenser. Let's try to identify those.
Who knew that?
How about that new again? So the British ooh sound keeps making its appearance. I know it's hard to fight against. I know that that's going to be tricky.
Who knew?
New versus no. So instead of new, more no.
Who knew that cookbook?
That cookbook. I like how you're holding your vowels. I like your stress on cook. It sounds great. I really like that. Yeah, so my big thing here is right now just on new. Just trying to get more relaxed and lower new.
Who knew that cookbook?
I think that first part, yeah, aside from that, I think this first part sounded pretty good.
That cookbook had good food.
Had good food. I want to hear that part again.
Had good food.
Why the pause?
Book had good food.
Why that pause between had and good? This is like had good food. Had good food. Do you guys hear that? Maybe it's just me.
Cookbook had good food.
I would have been a little smoother with that. Had good food. Because by having that pause, you're kind of creating a new thought group. But I'm not understanding why you would have a new thought group there. I would have kept flowing.
Book had good food.
So instead of had good food, more had good food. Had good food. That had good is going to link together a little bit more. Had good food. Okay.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Maybe slightly tense on food. It's not a big issue, but maybe just a little tense. Could be a little bit more relaxed.
Food.
Say food versus food. Because again, compare food versus food. Food. Good food. Okay, it just sounds a little tenser to me there. Okay. But yeah, lots of things to like there. I think overall it's pretty strong. I'm just take a look at those suggestions and see if those make sense. Thank you as always for sending your audio. I cannot do this without you guys. Just want to check in on the chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. People have questions and things. Okay. No worries. I didn't think the background noise, it wasn't as heavy as some of the other ones. So I think it's okay about the background noise in your file. Okay. All right, let's take a listen to the next one. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let's see what we got here. Then we have some nice ones to listen to.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food? Okay, so what could we say for this one?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Cookbook. Okay, stresses firstly. What word are you stressing in this first part?
Who knew that cookbook?
The compound noun. You bit the head fake. It tricked you. You put the stress on book as opposed to food. So again, it's compound noun. So instead of cookbook, you want to say cookbook. So change your stress there. And notice how big of a change that's going to make on your first part. Who knew that cookbook?
Who knew that cookbook?
Versus cookbook. Hear a difference? Okay. I would also say that you sound a little bit tense on your book.
That cookbook.
Cookbook, especially book. And that's actually a very common thing I see with students is they can pronounce the sound okay, except for like certain words where it gets a little bit trickier. And I see that with like B's and P's especially. So just make sure that the B doesn't have to be super strong and the B doesn't have to be super tense. So it's not boo, it's more buh, very light. Okay, buh, 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 book. Open your mouth a little wider. Buh, book. And how about the second half?
Cookbook had good food.
Had good food. Had good food.
Book had good food.
Had good food. Had good food. Had good food. Food versus food. So it's not. I think your sound's a little bit tense.
Food.
Because I'm hearing food versus food. Food. Again, you want that to be lower and more relaxed. Good food. You could also probably use a sharper falling intonation. So instead of food, more food. Had good food. Had good food. Some of that though could just be because your placement is just too high. So just by lowering your placement, the intonation might actually be okay. Okay, but those would be my biggest suggestions there. Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Okay. In general, I like your rhythm and your pace. I think that's fine. I like the had good.
Had good food.
Had good, like join those together. I like that. Okay. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Can't do this without you. Take a listen to your last 3 files. Okay. Let's take a things. I just want to say that good food. I like that. It's been about 3 weeks now. I can remember how tense. Oh yeah, for sure. Denny's comment saying about their placement. Yeah, I think your placement is becoming more relaxed, which is great. Again, Italian is just more. It's a tenser language than American English is. So I definitely notice is sounding way more relaxed. Just take it that extra step. Get it just a little bit lower. Yeah, definitely. And I think some of this is what you're saying. So let's kind of lose control of it. Airy is not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to make sure it's coming from the right spot because right now I still think we're kind of high. Okay, if you can get that airy but lower, I think you'll be in a good situation. Okay, I think you're close. I do want you to continue practicing that. Hello to Shabam. Thank you for checking us out on the Lang 8 stream. If you want to hear what I'm hearing and see what I'm seeing, you can go to youtube.com/fluentamerican and listen to all of our friends. Okay, 3 files. I have like 5 minutes. Let's do a blitz through these really quick. First one here.
Who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had?
Who knew that cookbook? Why are you stressing who?
Who knew that cookbook?
Who knew that cookbook? Your who is very strong. Reduce that. So instead of who knew that cookbook, who knew that cookbook? Who knew that cookbook? Put the stress more on cook. Okay.
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Your good also probably could be a little bit more relaxed. Okay, so it's a good, more good, had good food, had good food. Shabam, I see your question. I'll be right there. Who knew that cookbook had good food? Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Who knew that cookbook had good food?
Yeah. I think even food's a little bit tense, but in general it's okay. But good feels a lot tenser to me. So I would try to get good a little bit more relaxed. But I like your stresses. So my big thing is take the stress off of who, put the stress more on cook. And also good. Try to get that a little bit more relaxed. Those would be my big suggestions there. Okay. I'm sorry, Z, I do have to go on these quick, but thank you for sending the audio. I do hope that's helpful. Shabam asks, can you tell me good methods to learn how to speak English fluently? That's another huge question to try to answer in a couple minutes. My one suggestion I could say right now is do more shadowing. I would try to do like 5-10 minutes of shadowing every day. In addition to that, I would recommend try talking about a topic. You can even record yourself for like 2 minutes and then talk about it again, the same topic, and record yourself and then talk about it again. And the more times you do that, the more comfortable you're going to get. You know, the more times you talk about something, the easier it gets. Another variation of that activity is to like listen to like a podcast or like the news for like 2 minutes and then record yourself giving a summary of what you just listened to. So that way, you know what vocab you heard and you can try to use that same vocab. You can listen to the original audio and compare the things you said versus the original and things like that. So I do think those are some quick techniques you can use to practice your speaking and fluency. The other thing is just talking more. You need to put yourself in experiences to communicate and talk. Okay. Shabama, I know that's really fast, but I do hope that's helpful. Okay.
Who knew?
Okay. Our last two audio files before we head out. Listen to the first one.
Who knew that? Daddy? Wait just a second, baby. Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
That changed on me in a second.
Who knew that? Daddy?
I missed that word.
Wait just a second, baby.
You say which is the second, baby?
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
It's like, who knew that Cookbook had good? Kind of a lot of starts and stops, right? So I would recommend try to link your words together a little bit more. Play around with reductions because right now every word is getting so much emphasis. And again, English in general doesn't really like that. If a word's not stressed, you don't have to hold it as long. Don't pronounce every word equally.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Because you hear that said, who knew that Cookbook had good food? Like every single word is really clear. And, you know, if the goal is just having people understand you, that's one thing. But I don't think that, you know, for most people that watch my channel, that's not your goal is to be clear. Your goal is to sound natural. So keep in mind all those things that we talked about in terms of what words you could reduce and link together more. Okay, those would be my biggest suggestions for that audio. Thank you for sending it. I hope that's helpful. And our last one.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Let's try it one more time.
Who knew that Cookbook had good food?
Okay. It's always kind of hard to provide some feedback for this audio file. I would say
who knew that
who knew you're kind of making your vowels into diphthongs. Just watch out for that. Some of that could just be from singing, but instead of doing like ooh, just doing ooh. Okay, just a note on that.
Cookbook.
That cookbook. Again, you're kind of stressing book more than cook. So again, don't forget about that. It's compound noun. Also, make sure you're not adding a vowel sound after that case. So this is not cookbook. It's just cookbook.
The book had good food.
And then take the stress off of had, and then put the stress on food. Had good food. Had good food. Because those would be my suggestions there. Okay, we made it. I do have to run to my next class. Shabam, unfortunately, I don't have links right now. I would suggest trying apps like Hello Talk, or again, like Tandem and other things you can find online to find speaking partners. Let's just check the... Let's see what's going on. It's going from the right spot. Facts like where's something off. Yeah. I think it's, again, Danny, I think it's just too high. Lower in the throat. So again, those exercises where we do, like, for instance, if you do an ooh sound, you try to lower it, like ooh, ooh. Just trying to get that as low as you can. Okay. All right. I think can be helpful. Okay. Yeah, I think relaxing is a tricky thing. It sounds like it should be easy, right? But it's something that can take concentration and focus, ironically. So relaxing is not an easy thing to do. So I think that's a common problem that a lot of my students have. But all right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today on your Saturdays. I know you have a million things to do. You have families, you have activities, you have girlfriends or hunts for girlfriends and things like that. So I do appreciate you spending some time with me. I will see you next week. Save the pronunciation file where you sent them, because that's the same link we use every week. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good day. Have a good night. Have a good afternoon. Keep an eye out for our video coming out tomorrow. We're going to talk about how to pronounce numbers in a way that actually sounds natural, not just clear, but natural. I will see you guys next time. You guys take care.